Roy is a top agent. Not only is he a great fighter, he's also got a secret weapon. Facing a siege of hundreds of men, Roy takes out the latest weapons from HQ and prepares to break out. But the enemy is unharmed, and a cute cat appears in the air. Luckily, Roy has a lot of equipment on him. He took off his bow tie and turned it into a dart to cut the gong. With his extraordinary skill, he took down a host of enemies. Then he threw the buttons of his shirt, and finally he walked up to the gong with ease. With the force of the explosion, Roy crashed through the roof and caught up with the helicopter, through the cabin and grabbed the case. The mission was completed with flying colors. And then when Roy returned to headquarters, everyone lined up to welcome him. But when he saw the glitter on his body, he was furious. He made his way to the weapons development room. When everyone saw the glitter on Roy's body, the researchers instantly guessed it was Jack's work. Jack had been a clever boy, but the equipment he developed had no lethal effect. It was like a child's prank tool. Roy thought that one day Jack would get him killed. He fired Jack straight away. Then Roy came back to deliver the job with glee. Who knew that all he'd get back was an empty chest? Before Roy could even think about it, the top brass at HQ were about to arrest him, because the drone that was supposed to be recovered was still doing its job. Roy was the one controlling the drone on the monitor. Roy had no choice but to run. To prove his innocence, he has to go to the fired Jack for technical support. This is when Jack's new research is successful. He turns around and is surprised by Roy's sudden appearance. Roy drank the potion from Jack's glass without asking. Jack was dumbfounded at the sight, because the potion he had developed was a shape-shifting potion. After hearing Jack's explanation, Roy was in disbelief. But the next thing he knew, the potion had an effect. The palm of his hand instantly shrank and he looked at the rest of his body. When he opened his eyes again, he had turned into a pigeon. Roy couldn't believe what was happening. It wasn't until the mother pigeon came up and showed her love that he realized the truth. He asked Jack to give him the antidote, but Jack told him it was the perfect mode of invisibility. No one can find out who he is, not to mention that Jack hadn't even developed the antidote. When Roy heard this, he stormed out of the house. He was going to catch his imposter on his own. He wanted nothing more to do with Jack. He tried to drive as a matter of habit. He had forgotten that he had become a pigeon, but he couldn't get in at all. That's when Jack followed him, took out his mobile arsenal. Jack wanted to join Roy's operation. Roy thought he had to rely on this freak to help him regain his human form. He had no choice but to agree. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, agents from headquarters arrived. Jack's house was torn down in a matter of minutes. Roy activated his autopilot and made his escape. Then he activates his weapons and prepares to hold off his pursuers. But Jack doesn't agree. As the two argue, the car keeps changing modes. As a result,
System shut down. Goodbye.
It's a good thing you can still drive manually. Roy had turned into a pigeon, but with a bit of haphazard maneuvering. They escaped the chase by mistake. They were then redirected to Mexico by plane. But as soon as they got off the plane, they met the enemy. It was then that Roy realized the advantages of pigeons. He's also pulling like crazy in front of the bad guys. No one paid any attention to him. Then Roy was about to steal the rune card. Jack volunteered to help, but Roy declined. He didn't want to risk taking this freak with him, but he hadn't gone 2 steps when he came across a flock of pigeons. Not only did they understand him, they offered to be Roy's buddies. Roy doesn't care and walks alone to the front. A pigeon follows his example. He was crushed by the luggage. Roy was well on his way to getting his room card. At that moment, the lady at the front desk suddenly appeared. Without saying a word, she slapped the keypad down. Luckily, the other pigeons had already stolen the room card easily. Then Roy went to the gangster's room alone. He wanted to find out the buyer of the drone. To his surprise, he was grabbed by the other guy. He came up with a finger. Roy also tried to use his best trick to knock out the triad boss. The gangster raised a stone pier and was ready to kill Roy. In the nick of time, Jack stepped in just in time, but he wouldn't say a word. No matter how hard he was pressed, Roy had no choice but to ask Jack to use a weapon to extract a confession. But Jack just took out a biro and sprayed it in his face. Then the mobster gave up all the information about the buyer. The man impersonating Roy was his nemesis, the mechanic. He was now in Venice, stealing information from agents and preparing to take them all out. That's when their captors arrived again. Jack and Roy prepare to escape through the window, but it doesn't go so smoothly. After a bumpy ride, they finally landed safely, but then they are surrounded by agents.